Hello. I do a lot of videos in front of this bookcase, so I thought today, for a change, I'd actually take a couple of the books out and we'd reflect on them together. Today's reflection is all about racism. And you might be thinking, oh, not again, he's spoken about this before. Why are we having to speak about this? This is confined to America, isn't it? Not to this country. And I think that's wrong. I think we do need to reflect on it. Because I think that as Christians, we're always called to reflect on this, and it's a problem we do see in this country. So I want us to reflect looking at the Bible, and in particular, the story of Abraham. I also want us to reflect using some words from a really important book on this topic. It's called Exclusion and Embrace, and it's written by Miroslav Volf. First of all, let's look at the Bible. In Genesis chapter 11, we read all about Abraham. We hear about the family that he comes from. We hear about where he lives. It sounds like a comfortable existence. And then in Genesis chapter 12, God calls him away from that comfortable existence, calls him to a new land. And Abraham went. And we then read that we are all now his descendants. In Hebrews chapter 11, we read, by faith, Abraham went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. This tells us something about where our loyalties lie. In Exclusion and Embrace, Volf says, the ultimate allegiance of those whose father is Abraham can be only to the God of all families of the earth, not to any particular country, culture, or family. The oneness of God implies God's universality. And most of us would say, Amen. Of course, we need to love our neighbour. But sometimes actions speak louder than words. Black Lives Matter is not just a slogan. I was sickened by a letter I read this week. It was a letter that was received by a black theology student in this country who had been rejected from 8 different curacies that he'd applied for in the Church of England. The letter said this: we do not think that it is worth pursuing a conversation with you about the curacy. We are not confident that there is sufficient match between you and the particular requirements of that post. Firstly, the demographic of the parish is monochrome white working class, where you might feel uncomfortable. Wow. The reason we need to reflect on racism is because this isn't a problem confined to America. This is in this country. This is in this church. And the more I've been reflecting on it, the more I've thought maybe that disgusting letter which showed conscious racism was just a tip of an iceberg. Maybe it's just what sits on top of a whole load of unconscious racism. How many times has a candidate not even been called for an interview because they look different from the person who was giving out the job? How often has an interview panel gone with the candidate who looks like them, even though they don't realise that they're biased and that has fed into their conclusions? So maybe we need to be reflecting on things like racism, not just using words, important as they are, but maybe we also need to use a mirror too and look at our actions. In the past, how often have I blocked someone on their journey? Whether consciously or unconsciously, how often have I got in the way of somebody else who is also a child of God and a descendant of Abraham? And more importantly, how am I going to act to help other people, all of God's children, on their journey in the future?